Hi, everyone. My name is Peter Armaly, and I am the Vice President of Customer Success at ESG, and I'm welcoming you to this hour of our monthly series called Customer Success Unlocked. We think of our webinar series as a vital part of our strategy for educating the market about how you can think about addressing various customer success challenges and opportunities, and we're grateful you're joining us today. At ESG, we focus our energy on helping companies build and operationalize customer success organizations or to transform their existing ones. Through our strategies, processes, and people, we help CS organizations strengthen their relationship to their customer community, improve their metrics, and accomplish their ultimate goals for reducing churn, increasing retention, and increasing authentic advocacy. The topic of today's webinar is the best customer engagement programs are programmed, measured, and human. Before I introduce our guest today, I just need to inform you of a few small details about the webinar. It's being recorded, and that recording will be made available to all registrants within 24 hours. We're going to have a conversation for about 45 minutes, 50 minutes, and we'll try to leave the remainder of the hour to respond to audience questions. Please submit any of those questions that come to your mind during the webinar in the Q&A window. We'll be keeping an eye on it and may bring a pertinent question in during the conversation if it makes sense at that moment. Otherwise, we'll save it for the end. We enjoy audience engagement, so feel free to let everyone know in the chat where you're logging in from around the world. You can also use the chat feature if you just feel like sharing a thought with us about a topic. We really appreciate any engagement whatsoever. So thanks for your attendance and participation. Our guest today is Abheesh Dinavahi, the Vice President of Customer Success at Signeasy, which is a leading e-signature and contract workflow management platform. At Signeasy, Abheesh is responsible for leading customer-facing teams that drive customer engagement and revenue expansion by ensuring the success, retention, and growth of Signeasy's customers. He's a customer-centric leader with 15 years of experience leading global teams across customer success, account management, and customer support. His expertise lies in building successful customer engagement programs and nurturing high-performance teams. He's also a seed investor and a co-founder of an online learning platform focused on STEM education for high school students. Abheesh, welcome to the show. I give all of our guests a minute to add any additional color about themselves and to introduce everyone to the company. So would you like to take a minute to say more about yourself and perhaps educate the audience a bit about Signeasy and maybe even the online learning platform?
Thank you, Peter, for the warm welcome and for having me on Customer Success Unlocked webinar. And hello, everyone. Since my formative years, I've always enjoyed talking to people. It helped me quench my thirst for curiosity. I've been very fortunate to have a career in customer-facing roles where I've honed my communication and relationship building skills. Prior to Signeasy, as Peter mentioned, I co-founded an online learning tutoring platform to help high school kids learn math and science. The founder experience was phenomenal, which taught me so many things as we took an idea and built it into a business. I think the most valuable lesson or learning would be resourcefulness, because when building ground up and working with limited resources, one needs to find creative ways to tackle various challenges. It was an incredible time, and I'm super happy to report that my co-founder, who's also my wife, is doing a terrific job in growing the business. I've been with Signeasy for nearly 3 years now. I've been afforded tons of opportunity to tackle some of the most challenging goals. I get to work with a great set of people who are so passionate and committed to helping businesses manage their ever-growing paperwork through our product and help them get more productive. In my startup, I learned how to build from 0 to 1. And at Signeasy, I'm learning how to grow 10x. Peter and I will be covering some topics today to further unpack. So I'm really excited for it.
Thanks, Abheesh. Thanks for that introduction about yourself. It's interesting that you and your wife co-founded the company. It's almost like we could have a separate webinar about that, and maybe in the future. So let's get into the questions then. And the first one, as is my trademark, I have a long preamble to the first question, so I'm going to do this with you too. When you and I talked a couple of weeks ago, we shared how we are each eternal students, and that one way we maintain and increase our knowledge is by reading books. You mentioned one book called The Expansion Sale, written by Eric Peterson and Tim, I hope I don't butcher this last name, Tim Reisterer. I want to pull in a quote I found inside that book at the beginning of the very first chapter, because I think it helps frame, much of what we're going to talk about today. Quote, "Sometimes we joke that people get into marketing, sales, or customer success to avoid science and math. Yet it turns out you need a lot of science and, sadly, quite a bit of math to truly understand how to influence people's buying decisions." Close quote. The chapter then moves into talking about decision science, which I imagine many in the audience today are familiar with. But what people might not be familiar with thinking about very much is something that affects them every single day as customer success or sales, and maybe even especially sales and marketing professionals. It's called status quo bias. Essentially, the status quo bias is about a customer's natural instinct to stay put with where they are for a variety of reasons, including the anticipation of regret and blame, cost of change, and selection difficulty. It shows up again and again, whether it's when they are a prospect or even as an existing customer. The natural inclination of people is often to stay with what they're familiar with. Here's the question, Abheesh. Surely as a leader, you and your teams have encountered such customer and prospect status quo scenarios. What are your strategies for dealing with such individuals? How do you prepare your team for having such challenging conversations?
Thank you, Peter. I would like to pick a quote from the book, The Expansion Sale, and probably in this webinar today, we'll be dropping some names of other books along the way. So the quote is like, in a competitive market, renewals are really resells, right? And then the fundamentals of SaaS is about doing away with barriers of entry and exit, right? I mean, people can just sign up to a product and whenever they want to cancel, they can just hit the cancel button and they go, right? And like how it used to be 15, 20 years ago with on-premise products and a very high cost of entry, and that basically also kind of made them stay stuck with the product and not just switch very fast, right? This means that the renewal conversations today have suddenly become a very critical moment for every customer relationship, right? Now, the excerpt that you read talks about status quo both on sales cycle and in customer success interactions, which is typically post-sales, right? So while with prospects, we need to challenge the status quo. You're basically bringing out a conversation on how your product's better than what they're with, and how they can be better, faster, save more money, be more productive, etc. Right? But with existing customers, it's on a very high level. We are reinforcing the status quo, right? Why you should stay with us and how you've been successful so far. But if you kind of zoom in, you also need to challenge the status quo with the existing customers. It could be while driving product adoption to new enhancements in the product, which might require them to change their workflows in order to take advantage of them. At Signeasy, for example, I mean, we have a SaaS product which has a user interface. They log in, they sign documents and send documents for signatures. We also have an API product where other product companies are powering their contract signature workflows using our product. So in a situation like that, with those customers and typically developers that we are talking to, whenever we release a new feature on our API, we need them to invest some engineering bandwidth into consuming those new features or enhancements and take it to their customers, right? So there is that conversation of changing the status quo that happens there as well, right? Yeah. And we need to challenge the status quo for other things. I mean, commercial way, right? To drive cross-sells, for driving expansions, for what the book talks about, right? Is price increases. So these are the kind of areas where it is necessary for us to navigate through the conversation where you're challenging the status quo, but in a way where you're not, breaking things down, right? I mean, you don't want the customer to lose lose faith in the service that you're providing. So I think a couple of strategies that kind of work in making sure you have a high impact conversation and you're delivering to what the customer's expectations are is, I mean, it just goes down to the basics. Go to every customer meeting with a lot of preparation, right? For that, I mean, you rely on a bunch of things. You rely on notes that I think you kind of go all the way back, especially enterprise customers. We do invest that kind of time of it probably is about 15 to 20 minutes before the call, where you were going through the sales notes. I mean, when it was sold, so some customers we kind of know in the back of our head, we've been talking to them, they've been with us for years. But if it's a customer who joined us about a year ago and it's their first renewal, you want to know the sales notes. Why did they even buy your product? What were their goals or the problem statements that they wanted to solve for? You want to look at the notes left by the onboarding specialist or the implementation specialist, right? And what were the initial hiccups, the teething problems, and how were they solved? And who are the stakeholders involved in solving them? You want to take a look at the data that you have, all the signals that are coming in from product usage into whichever platform that you're using, right? And those things, you need to translate the data into actionable conversation items, right? And you go with all of these things, which only makes you more prepared and increases the chances of success of that conversation with your customer while dealing with a change in status quo, right? And the next is to build great relationship with power users. Something that I say at work every day to my colleagues is, typically most of our customers sign up for the annual subscription versus the monthly. So we have a year to build that relationship with all different kinds of stakeholders, personas within the customer organization. I mean, one set of personas are the buyers. It could be the executive sponsor, it could be the procurement team, it could be their finance team, right? And then there's the whole list of user personas, which are basically the users who are using the product today, the potential users who could be using the product, which could be an adjacent team, another function, especially if your product is a horizontal product, which can be used by any team. Think of Slack, think of Microsoft Office, think of Signeasy, right? You need to kind of already identify all those people and build a relationship through, and you got this year, right?
Or at least a strategy, or at least a strategy for how to talk to each one. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And leverage and with the power users, you need to leverage their success while you're talking to procurement. Typically in the renewal conversations happening with the executive sponsors, and they may not proactively bring the users onto the conversation, but that's where CSMs need to put in that work to make sure that the power users are coming into the conversation. So they're able to express their success with the product, and they're able to influence these adjacent teams of their success, and it can strike a expansion conversation right away, right? Some other things that we do here at Signeasy, probably not during the renewal time, but through the year, right after a successful onboarding, they've activated the product and their usage is going really well, is inviting customers to leverage the beta release programs. I mean, we are constantly evolving our product. That also requires change of status quo. I mean, it's a new feature. We spoke about how it is on API. It's far easier there because you're working with developers, and they kind of understand where we are coming from. But when you're talking to our SaaS customers who are so diverse across industries, it could be accountants, it could be law firms, in our case, right? But generally speaking, when you release beta programs and things, bring these users, get them to try out, and see if they're able to get success. In the process, they may have to change their workflows or improve their workflows, right? Inviting customers to be your design partners. Now, this can be probably not everybody. There's a particular ICP that would qualify to be your design partners on what you're about to build, because there you're exposing the future roadmap to these customers and consulting them about how they would take advantage of it, and it kind of helps our product managers to prioritize, right?
Yeah, and depending how those beta programs go, I thought in my experience is that that's an opportunity to strengthen the partnership. And everyone talks about
Absolutely.
making your product sticky. That's a good opportunity to kind of accelerate that stickiness if it assuming goes well.
Yeah. And typically we've seen like our customers feel so incredibly valued when we invite them into our drawing room and into the drawing board and discuss things with them and give them a chance to provide inputs to shape our product. I think it's such a great experience for both customers and ourselves.
Yeah,
and
100%.
I think taking these pieces together could basically result into building a customer advisory board, right? And we do these things at Signeasy, and all of these things together kind of help in navigating through these status quo changing conversations.
That's
You also asked about like, how do I prepare our team in these conversations, right? So that's a little more tactical there. I think we covered a bit of tactical in the strategy. Some of the tactical things is we help our CSMs and I mean not just CSMs, our sales folks and our implementation folks, right, become product experts. They know in and out of our product, but also customer industry experts. Because yes, typically during the sales cycle, when a customer is talking to your company, they want to know everything about what your product can do and how it's going to help them. So the product expertise kind of helps there. But as you build the relationship, as a CSM, I want to become an expert of my customer's industry and what's going on in their industry and what's happening with their company. Keep myself updated. I even set myself Google alerts of what's going on there, so I'm able to bring that into conversations, right? Create battle cards. So especially during renewal, a lot of procurement folks, I mean, they have their KPIs. Their goals is to use the budgets or optimize on the budgets, right? So they want to look for an alternative that is cheaper or better in some other features or whatever, right? So they're always kind of shopping around and typically even just to re-engage the existing service provider, they do shop around and bring those quotes and build up as a discussion, right? So in those kind of situations, to tackle them really well, we already create internal battle cards. I mean, we've got so much of anecdotal evidence from so many conversations that we've kind of consolidated them and create these battle cards. The third is to use these battle cards. So I think one of the things that we did a couple of years ago, and it's been going really well so far for us, was using a conversation intelligence tool like Gong, which will pop up all these battle cards. It just makes a CSM's life a lot more easier, empowering them with all this information that's there. You don't want this information to be sitting static on a Confluence or a Notion, but you kind of bring that into the conversation and make it available like right there bang on their screen by using tools like Gong, right? And outside of these conversations, when there are these internal case studies that we create for reference, for learning and preparing themselves for the next conversation. So these are the kind of things that we do here.
Thank goodness we're recording this webinar. You went through a whole litany of really great tactics, Abheesh. And I guess before I leave this question, I just want to say to the audience, there's one more thing you should probably think about is understanding that depending on the industry your customer's in, there's things you need to think about or consider in terms of status quo. Some industries are much more cautious. Let's think about the banking industry, and it's really relevant today that people there will have a different appetite for disturbing the status quo than other more loosey-goosey industries. And we can criticize the banking industry, of course. But by and large, the banking industry is much more regulated and they're more sensitive to changing the status quo, even if it's your product, so to Abheesh's point, you still have to address the status quo, even if it's your product that needs to change or the way they use the product. So that was a really good discussion, Abheesh. So let's move on to the next question. Included in the title of this webinar are the words programmed, measured, and human. For customer engagement professionals like us, that's an exciting combination. And by me saying that's exciting, you can tell why I might not be the most invited person to dinner parties when I talk about this kind of stuff, because it's, not everyone finds that exciting. But anyway, some people might have heartburn over the two words programmed and human in the same phrase. But the way I see it, success at scale has to be programmed. And when we think about what makes a customer, us as customers or consumers, want to buy more or pursue a goal with a company, is that we want the information from that company to feel that it was meant for us, for me. So a human touch is important. So the question is, how do you begin to design a program for customer engagement that does all those things that allow you to extend your reach and yet still make it feel personal? What are the key elements you want to make sure are included in such a program?
Sure. So here at Signeasy, we have a large number of mid-market to enterprise customers, but we also have a very long tail of SMB customers as well. So we've essentially created a high touch and tech touch customer engagement programs to engage with customers from different segments, basically. To begin the design, I think it requires for folks from different teams, I mean, from product, marketing, sales, and customer success to sit together and plot the entire customer journey for the identified ICPs and the user personas. I kind of missed including the design team there, which is also very important, right? Because and after that, you need to identify the touch points for all of these personas, where they'll be interacting with the brand and the company, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when I say that, it's not just the product, because these touch points start right from the website to the product to the automated emails that go out to these customers, and notifications that are sent if a product is available on an iOS or Android device. And then the conversations that happen with the sales teams and the customer facing teams, right? Whether it be onboarding or customer success. So these are all the touch points that are there, and we all need to kind of look at each of them, map the entire journey, and it's a massive exercise, which is typically done iteratively as a product, a website, and all the other assets evolve, right? So I think it probably is very easy for, or maybe not, for someone to build this if it is a new startup that's about to take shape and launch their product. But typically, all of us as leaders are working with companies that are already in business, have been there for many years. The product's been being used for many years by millions of customers, millions of users. In that case, it is a very deliberate action that's been taken there as a strategy, where we carefully observe a lot of things, take a lot of data, and build out an entire journey and the touch points for the programmed program those touch points, right? But again, I think some key elements that need to go in there is, I think, again, since we're looking at end to end, let's say from at the top of the funnel, it's all about the website, how they interact with the website. Do you have a chatbot in there, or is it human chat? And the landing pages, and where does it take them? If the product gives out a trial, how does the trial work? Is there an onboarding or a small tutorial in the app which kind of helps them activate and get the first value very quickly, right? Time to first value. So there are these things. At the middle of the funnel, you're looking at lead scoring and measuring the activity during the trial. That kind of decides if you want the user and the customer to take the tech touch direction or go the high touch way, right? So that's where we are collecting information. How big is the company size, or how many? For Signeasy, our product is based on number of seats. So how many seats are they looking to buy? If it's 10 or below, typically it's tech touch. But if it's higher number of seats, that's a higher value of the contract. So typically those are mid-market to enterprise customers. They want custom pricing, and their needs could be different. So we route them through to our sales teams, right? So that's where a very high human touch is coming in. And there's also these outliers which need to be considered. I mean, they probably on a quick look they may seem like they fit under the tech touch, but you know that you want to give them a high touch service. So these automations that are there also allow us to kind of pause and review what's going on to the customer, right? So typically the enabled teams are kind of observing them and routing them in the right direction. So that's on sales and from top of the funnel to middle and the bottom of the funnel, right? And then you've got pre-onboarding and onboarding that happens. Typically pre-onboarding, that's an investment that we make with mid-market enterprise customers. When they start a product trial, we already go in there and start working with those users, activate them and their product and get them to start using it, because that's kind of building the entire case for the success of the sale.
Right.
When these power users are already starting to use it and they influence the decision making that's happened between the executive sponsor and the procurement teams, right? And some key elements beyond onboarding and implementation is goal setting and expectation setting. So goal setting could be essentially of when we're talking to these customers, understand what their goals are, and show them the path and the route on how we're going to achieve these goals and the milestones as we achieve them, right?
Yeah, and
there's
so,
a lot of
Abheesh, let me interrupt you there. Is that true? That goal setting, is that also true for the tech touch segment as well as the higher touch?
Good question. Yes, it's true. And there the goals may not be as elaborate. I mean, that's where apps like integrations like Pendo or app queues and others come into place, right? So it's a self-serve motion that happens in there where you log into your product for the first time and it already kind of gives you a tutorial and it sets you up with some goals. Okay, in our case, send your first document out for signature, add these fields, and maybe there's a new feature that's been released recently, getting them to giving it a try. So there's a lot of onboarding that happens on product for tech touch, right? And the human element can be brought in by creative messaging, right? And that's and deciding which format do you want to use, or which channel do you want to use to communicate. Do you want to use a notification? Do you want to use an on-screen prompt? Do you want to use an email? Do you want to use a chat bubble that opens up and then gives that information? So that's where the design team really comes in, understanding the user experience and designing the user experience there.
Okay, right? Good. Yeah, that's what I was hoping to hear, was how that level of sophistication gets introduced through a design team, through an operations team. That's really ensuring that through the customer's journey is reflected in the choice of content and touch points that they're going to engage with. Right.
Exactly. And typically customer success teams are measuring these things, and you kind of, now that the journey is plotted out, you're able to see who's navigating through the journey successfully within a reasonable time, and who's stuck in the journey, right? So if you see some customers who are stuck, the customer success platform that we use throws an alert, and that's where we kind of bring in the human intervention and kind of help them. Hey, you seem to be stuck with somewhere, maybe we can help you to cross the finish line there, right? So that's where you've got this blend of tech and high touch happening. Whereas with typically high value customers and enterprises, it's purely high touch that happens there, because that's what they see, right? And also the complexity of their organization structure kind of demands for it. And beyond this onboarding and the initial setting up and implementation of the product, goes into purely customer success operations, right? I mean, sales is typically not engaged with them. It's mostly customer success teams. Obviously, there are these monthly check-ins that team members do. There are quarterly business reviews that happen with these customers where they're just pulling together all of these things and kind of opening a discussion there. One of the important items or the elements to consider is also to communicate customer achievements.
Hmm.
I kind of felt that it was mostly forgotten. These goals are kind of set and these goals are kind of achieved, but I think we need to over communicate and show them that they're achieving these goals, and 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 we need to celebrate those achievements with those power users, and with the executive sponsors, right? And
Yeah.
you can celebrate it by thanking them, or rewarding them with some swag. We've tried that. It really helped us. It's been a grand success. I mean, it could be as simple as sending them some coffee mugs and T-shirts, right? With your company on it. I mean, how do you turn customers into your fans? I mean, they could. I'm sure there's a ton of material just on that topic available,
Yeah,
right?
and it's timely that today Anita Toth, who I call the queen of voice of the customer in the industry, posted something how you should try to make every moment, take every opportunity to make the customer feel good. And I think what you just described makes a lot of sense, is that when you achieve a milestone, make sure they are applauded for that. That's progress, and that's what we want, right?
Exactly. And in product, there could be these achievements that can be, can be displayed, right? And one, I mean, that's food for thought for product and design teams there.
Mhm.
And I think moving on, I think you're now working with successful customers, and that's where advocacy kicks in, right? So you wanna get some case studies from them. You want to get them to refer to other departments within their own business or other businesses, right? You want to get testimonials from them. So these are all the kind of elements that you want to put in while you're designing the entire customer engagement program. And one of the things that I find extremely useful and just an incredible thing is visiting the customers in person. Yes, we're all working in the SaaS environment where it's mostly inside teams, but we also do take time to go out, attend these conferences and webinars in person and things and workshops, right? I mean, the last time we both met at a workshop in DC, and one of the things I got an opportunity to do was, yes, the workshop for 2 days, but I was around there for about a week visiting customers in the region. So it
Yeah.
was an awesome a road trip all the way from DC till New York, and I got to meet customers across many states, right? In Delaware, Pennsylvania, in Maryland.
Good for
So
you.
I had an amazing experience meeting customers and sitting in front of them. It's just such an amazing experience, and it's for both of them, right? For both for customers and for yourselves.
Mhm.
It's such a rewarding experience that if companies are able to do that, I think they should take advantage in doing that. And especially with a certain segment of customers, it really helps building that relationship and that
Yeah,
engagement.
10 years ago, I was the head of premier support for Eloqua before they were acquired by Oracle. And we had 45 different accounts or customers of that service. And I made it a point for the 1 year, the second year I was there, I'm going to visit every single customer face to face. They were all in United States and Canada. So it wasn't that difficult, but I did it. It was a lot of like logistical challenge around coordinating
Yeah,
all those
scheduling.
regional visits and stuff, but I did it.
Yeah,
To your point, I 100% agree. I mean, if you can manage it, getting in front of a customer is hugely valuable.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's move on to the next question. I wanted to make sure we touch on this topic because I pointed it out in my announcement of you on the LinkedIn post. So it's about intentional leadership. The way I define that phrase, it is the ability for a leader to demonstrate to team members the power of connection between the pursuit and achievement of their tasks and goals with the higher order vision of an organization and a company. So Abheesh, can you share with us an example or two of how you've demonstrated intentional leadership? How did you sustain it day to day or month to month?
Sure, and I totally agree with you here, Peter. It's about having a very clear understanding and visibility to goals and the purpose, right? Purpose could be aligned to the vision, and some specific characteristics that of an intentional leader is being deliberate in their actions, right?
Mhm.
And ensuring that our everyday actions align with a strong and well articulated vision. Um, and I mean, and I'm just trying to think of if examples there to cite, because there are many. Perhaps I'll take this one, right? So I think at one time I needed to develop that muscle of driving expansions within the customer success team.
Mhm.
This is essentially when I inherited a team, and and back then any expansion related conversation was held by sales, and I kind of stepped into the company. I was new to my job, and my first thought was like, hey, why is the sales team working on expansions? Customer success could do make a much bigger impact only because they're working with these customers continuously, whereas sales teams probably spoke to them 2 years ago when they bought, or 3 years ago, right? And while most of the relationship building is happening here in customer success, I kind of felt like expansions must be handled by success team. Obviously, when we spoke about change and status quo, and this applies everywhere, even internally, right? And at first, there was a lot of resistance, like, hey, we don't want to be too salesy, and we want to focus on adoption and driving customer value. And I'm like, expansion is a massive signal of driving customer value. I mean, if a customer is buying more, or you know, buying, yeah, if they're buying more, it's clearly because they're seeing a lot of value from what we're giving them, and they see a lot of value in your interaction with them, right? So this was a problem statement I had to work with, and I think being a leader, it's a mindset, right?
Yeah.
And it starts from in that case, what I did was essentially, all right, so this is what my team's telling me. That's the signals that I'm getting. It's probably because they haven't done it before. There could be a fear of failure. There
Mhm.
could be I don't know how to do it. I mean, what we don't know is what we don't know, right? So with all of these things put together, the best decision for me was, all right, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to try expanding these accounts. So I'm going to own a bunch of these accounts myself
Mhm.
and start working with them. And I'm going to give you 100% visibility to what's happening, right? And you know, we begin on those conversations. Some don't work out. It's okay. And I'm going to showcase the things that did not work out well, or probably even my own mistakes. And I've always seen putting forth or exposing vulnerability earns a ton of respect,
Yeah.
and brings in so much of authenticity in the relationship, right? So, um, and then when we're succeeding, when we're expanding well, document the entire process, give the visibility, where team members would come and listen to those calls or read those emails. And now they've got a playbook in the making on how do I handle this? How do I get drive that expansion goals, right? So, I mean, fast forward today, our team is really confident on those conversations. To a fact, they enjoy it. They enjoy having those conversations with customers and driving on results on those metrics. We have a very well charted out playbook, and uh, talking points and strategy in the expansion conversation itself, which is super useful for our CSMs. They feel very empowered. What we do is provide a lot of contextual information and knowledge. What we don't want to do is impose controls,
Mhm.
because again, that goes back to leadership. I mean, you are hiring smart people,
Yeah.
and very capable and competent people, right? So you want to give them the decision-making power of, okay, these are all the options that I have. I'm going to navigate on how I think it fits well with this customer, and that's what they should feel. We should not be putting in a lot of controls and um, uh, uh, frameworks which kind of limit the possibility for for doing better, or for innovating, or for even making mistakes. I think
Yeah.
it's a very important part of one's journey, right? I mean, one of the books I would like to cite is No Rules Rules. It's a story of Netflix and their culture,
Yeah.
right? And there are some interesting things we can pick from there. So that was one example on how I kind of brought this in. I think another thing I want to kind of highlight is we're all creatures of habits, right? So leadership is developed by developing great habits, I think. And one of these things in a professional setting was heavily indexed on how to run one-on-one meetings. So what we did was come up with a clear structure of a one-on-one meeting on a weekly cadence. What's that we're going to be discussing? Typically, it's on. I'm interested to know how my team member is feeling. That's the first 2-3 minutes of the conversation, and then it goes down to what are the things that they're working on, what are the things that got completed and they're on track. Where do they need additional help, or any blockers or challenges that they have? Right. And so the moment you set this framework, you don't need to speak a lot as a manager, but you're listening in through the conversation. And listening plays a very important role in intentional leadership, right?
Yeah.
And when you're talking to all team members, you're kind of taking all of this into the other teams. I mean, you're compressing it into your interaction with other leaders across functions and with your manager, the CEO, and so on.
Yeah, you've described really great, thoughtful, intentional leadership, and the goal is to actually grow your people and not just to execute a program. It's actually to improve their ability to grow in their careers and become stronger contributors. And I liked how you talked about, this isn't for everybody, but you talked about how you were modeled it by actually having some accounts yourselves. And I've done that a couple of times in the last 15 years where I led teams and I actually took large accounts, 2 large accounts in each of those situations. That was hard to juggle team leadership with account responsibility, but I wanted to show how I like to see it done. And yeah, you go through that period of time where it's a lot of heavy lifting, but the team appreciated that, I think. And I got a lot of good feedback and a lot of good engagement, a lot of good collaboration with the team members. So if you can manage it, people in the audience, that's a good idea that Abheesh called out. I just want to kind of say that. So Abheesh, in the interest of time, let's move forward a little bit. I'm just going to skip one of the questions you and I kind of talked a little bit about and maybe get back to it, but I want to talk about this one. In the March-April edition of the Harvard Business Review magazine, there's a short article on a research study by the Academy of Management Journal. In the study is a conclusion that's many people might think it runs counter to what we all think, which is the general practice of leadership to not over-communicate, because there's a fear of overloading individual contributors or coming across to them as patronizing or pedantic. So the conclusion of the almost 3,000 sample study is that the opposite is true. The more successful leaders, a factor of 10, are those that do over-communicate versus under-communicate. So Abheesh, what's your style of communication? How effective do you think you are? And if we were to ask your employees right now, what do they think they would say about your effectiveness as a communicator?
So I haven't read this HBR article. I'm going to read this. But I think it first goes down to what is being communicated before you go into how you communicate it, right? I think, or whether you over communicate or under communicate, right? So I think great leadership is about. I would index on over communicating the vision versus over communicating tactical things. That's what brings in a very striking difference between, am I being inspirational to the entire team, or am I being patronizing and pedantic, right? So if I'm over communicating on metrics and even goals for the matter, and tasks, that is not good in my opinion. Definitely over communicate on the vision so that everybody knows what the vision of the organization is. And typically organizations, at least with one step lower, we kind of have a theme for the year, right? So this year, our vision is to achieve this, this, and this, right? We want to grow our customer advocacy, and we want to drive our referrals and testimonials and things. Basically, they all lead to bringing down the customer acquisition costs, right? And run the marketing flywheel. So let's say if that's the vision, I kind of even put in a bunch of metrics in there. I mean, I'm just making it on the fly, so I didn't put it together really well. But if I had a minute, I'm sure I would put it together much better. But yeah, I mean, when you over communicate on vision, I think it's really helpful. It creates a very healthy environment. People understand where you're coming from and why later on when you're talking about discussing tactical things.
Yeah.
And when it is tactical things, typically just listen. Your team members, let them be the ones who are speaking, and they will, right? That really helps. So communication style, I think mine largely is, again, while setting the vision, it's authoritative. You're kind of working with the CXO, the C-suite, and forming this vision. Me and all the other leaders are giving a lot of inputs while we sit together and form the vision. And once that's been decided, we're cascading it to all our teams. So there, it's a authoritative communication style. Generally, on a day-to-day basis, it's an assertive style of communication, which kind of makes a I'm making these points, but it also creates an environment where they're able to question that and get clarity on things and give me feedback and suggest me some other ideas, right? And for tactical things, I've leaned on direct communication. It's typically it's a type 2. It's probably not even a decision in many cases, but if it is a decision, it's a type 2 decision, which can be easily reversed.
Yeah.
So a simple, easy direct communication and keeping it short really helps. But having said that, I mean, as for the tone goes, these could be the communication styles.
Yeah.
The tone is something else, right? I mean, just keep it friendly, calm, and respectful.
And personalized, right? I mean, going back to what we talked about
Exactly.
earlier in terms of communicating with accounts, you should do the same with your team members, meaning people have different kinds of styles of personalities and how they receive information. And you should be mindful of what those are and kind of tailor your kind of approach accordingly.
Exactly.
Yeah. So there's a question from the audience. I just want to make sure we address. So Abheesh, how do you feel about customer success managers handling the contracts, meaning pricing out deals, putting together the contract, etc.?
Can you repeat the question, Peter? Sorry, I didn't get it.
It goes back to one of our questions we were talking about earlier. And really the audience member just wants to know, what are your thoughts around customer success managers putting together contracts or even like assembling elements of the contract for renewal, I think. Okay.
So here's how we do it, right? It kind of depends on the product itself and the nature of the product. So here are our thoughts based on our experience, what we see here. Most of the things are already kind of put together in our terms of use and terms of service, right? And there's that very clear expectation that's set with our customers. Obviously, within the enterprise segment, there could be some things that are custom made for them. It could be we're not using the pricing that we publish on our website, but we do a different pricing model, not just the price itself, right? And typically our sales teams do this. And at renewal, if you want to drive this expansion, if you want to, let's say, do a multi-year contract, our team members have the freedom to explore these things. Because ultimately what we want to do is make sure our customers are getting the value from our product and while doing business with us, right? And so our customer success team, again, like I said earlier on, what we don't want to do is set controls, but rather help them set context and help them develop an ability to use better judgment, right? So they're working with customers. They know what's going on. They know what the customers need. I could give you an example. One of my CSMs were talking to an enterprise customer, and a very big, in fact, mining company. So it's not very. They're not a Microsoft or a Salesforce. It's a very not so software business. Let's put it that way.
Mm-hmm.
So while working with them, obviously they consume a lot of our product in huge quantity and number of seats. And our team basically wanted to have a price increase conversation that kind of would go into the contract. And that conversation started about 6 to 8 months before the renewal. And obviously you want to line it up along with the budgeting process within the customer's organization. I mean, before that can even happen, there's a very good amount of relationship building that's been done. We're in great terms with the executive sponsors and others. So now the CSM's talking to the executive sponsor about this, and they say, hey, you know what, we'll plan this in our next budgeting cycle, right? And when the time comes, there's obviously some level of resistance in there for a price increase. Although they understand that over this period, we've delivered incremental value through newer enhancements and features that we've brought into the product. And that's where the team went with, hey, how about this? We do a slight price increase, but we extend the contract for a 5-year period, right? So our CSM's already thinking like, hey, if I'm not able to drive higher NRR and revenue with this, I'm offsetting churn risks for the next 5 years, and improving cash flows, because they're gonna pay us immediately for those years, or maybe a couple of years right now, and a payment schedule for the remaining, right? So the moment you develop the contextual strategy within the team, you don't have to rely on too many controls. The team operates they feel empowered, and they're operating with a much higher level of confidence. And I don't really need to be involved in every single conversation that happens.
Yeah, and in the process, Abheesh, I think you've shifted kind of the mindset of the customer success professionals who work with you away from the kind of conventional perception of CSMs in our industry, which is that they're not comfortable. The perception is they're not comfortable around the commercial kind of items and the agreements, and that it robs the relationship of that trust. That's what we keep hearing. I'm not a believer in that. I think the way you're thinking about it, which is to say that if the CSMs really know their customers want to have these conversations with them, because they're the ones who are most knowledgeable, and they're the ones who are most trusted to give really good advice, whether this is the right sort of decision they should be making. I mean, I've lived that, so I kind of know that's true. And I wish more people would know that that's really what customers want. And I think you're actually building that at Signeasy, where you're enabling, as you said, you're enabling your team to have those kinds of conversations.
Maybe I just want to add one point here, and reflecting on my own experience of 15 years, right? When I started off in my career, there was no customer success, or at least I did not know about it.
Yeah.
I was an account manager, and there was basically sales folks and post-sales as account managers who are doing everything, making sure that the service is delivered from an operations standpoint. And if it's non-SaaS, because I operate in non-SaaS as well. And then working through renewals, getting expansions, price increases, etc. And the way I see it is, as we build a maturity model, right? We're moving away from generalists to specialists, right? And that's where I think this conversation needs to be kind of double-clicked and unpacked furthermore. For example, within Signeasy, what I can tell you is when we started, we basically had a bunch of CSMs, and they were generalists. They were driving usage, drive adoption goals, have QBRs with customers, understand their problem statements, see how our product is helping them and where it's not filling in the gaps, and kind of bring it down to the product team so they can take it to the drawing board and build on new features or enhancements, and the advocacy part, right? But today we feel like we've grown a lot. Our customer success function has achieved a higher level of maturity. And we felt, and we are seeing it in our metrics and in our predictability motion that we have and forecasts. So in fact, I remember taking it to the C-suite as a discussion that, hey, I think we should now split these teams into specialists. So let account managers come in who are actually focusing on expansion related conversations, and CSMs focused on adoption and advocacy related things, and onboarding specialists working on just purely the onboarding phase until D30, D60 of the customer journey. So I think that's the evolution that's been happening.
Okay. Yeah, that's good. And it's in line with what I'm reading from research agencies, how the shift of this industry, customer success, will be developing these sorts of capabilities. And I think, and that's the word I see too, is more specialization. So it should be fascinating to kind of be part of that and watch it as it unfolds. We've got 5 minutes left. I want to make sure I get to this question because it's more personal and I want the audience to get to know you a bit more. So I want to close, if we have time, there's a couple of questions in the from the audience that maybe get to. I'd like to close with this question about variety and whether it offers advantages to leaders. So the context is your personal history. You're born in India, you lived and worked in the United States for a number of years. You actually still work for a company. You work for a company that has offices in Dallas, Texas, but now you're in Mexico City. You've been there for a number of years. You actually lived in Cancun for a number of years before that. So you've been kind of all over the place in your professional life even. I'm not trying to not create a travelogue for the audience, but am interested in your thoughts on the topic of a variety of experiences and how they can shape a leader. So Abheesh, how has the variety of experiences and places in your life played a role in your development as a leader?
Oh, I mean, definitely has had a very big impact on me. And as a leader and as a professional. I mean, living in different places gives you that exposure to different cultures, different mindsets. In my case, even a different language. And for me, it was from one day to another, it just changed. Right, the day I decided to move to Mexico, I basically took a dive in the deep end, and I'm in this environment where I need to learn a new language and learn it very quickly. And I decided to build a startup while I was here. So I was also hiring people here. So it's about learning work cultures. It is learning the nuances that are there. I mean, for example, across cultures, what we can say is some cultures actually prefer direct conversations, and there are some cultures who completely are against those things, and in fact do not like confrontational conversations at all, even in a healthy way, right? So just navigating through these things really played a significant role in shaping who I am and how I am, right? And today at Signeasy, it's not just my experience living in different places, but also working with a global team. I've had an opportunity to work with folks in India, in the US, in Ukraine, in Europe, in Mexico, and Latin America. So on a day-to-day basis, you're working with folks from across the globe, and everybody brings in their uniqueness, that diversity, their own culture, and their own ways of problem solving, which is, I mean, like as a human being, we rely on patterns, right? And everyone's patterns are slightly different from the other.
Yeah.
So it made me become a lot more patient. It helped me learn, I think, how to connect with people better. And that's what basically has helped me to deliver well while I'm serving my team.
Yeah, I would say at a big, huge macro level, I think that's the secret to how the world is going to ever get successful, is by open-mindedness and a lot of open respect for different types of people and approaches. And it requires patience and it requires humility, which are both in short supply, it seems, at very senior levels. But nevertheless, I think we can do what we can, right? I think as leaders ourselves, we can just demonstrate what we believe will work. And so thank you for sharing that. I thought that was a really good question to pose to a leader is how their backgrounds kind of have shaped to be who they are right now. And I know you would say you're still not finished growing. And I think none of us should think that. We all are in process, right? So we're at the conclusion, actually, and I'm sorry I didn't get to a couple of questions, but I did want to make sure that, Abheesh, we got to have you speak a little bit about yourself. So thank you to you, Abheesh. Really appreciate you as being part of this. I thought it was really valuable, and I hope the audience felt the same. So audience, thank you for participating and attending as usual, and look forward to an announcement in a couple of weeks about the one we're going to schedule in April. We've got a lot of good sessions coming up. We've got a few scheduled or at least talked about in terms of topics going into the summer. So we're on a roll, and we want to thank you for being part of that roll. Bye, everybody. Have a great day. Bye, Abheesh.
Thanks so much, Peter. Bye.